Does God exist? And now what I'll do is, like on an airplane one time, I was talking to this guy, and I took my watch off and threw it on the ground in the middle of the aisle. I said, pretend like that's in the middle of the woods. You find your watch in the middle of the woods. There's two different ways it could have gotten there, for example. One way is lightning strikes several million times and stirs everything up. And there's a rubber tree plant that used to be there a long time ago, and it melted down and like shaped the different straps. And then you have some iron ore from some earthquakes and some different metals that combined together and made the whatever that's aluminum, the sulfate, magnesium, Bible study. So you got it all there, and then you got writing on it. So the lightning hit it and made writing. It has a little smell like Fritos, and so it's got a. That was horrible. I'm sorry, but you have to use humor whenever you're sharing the gospel. Use humor as often as you can. I love humor. Humor allows endorphins to be released, and it makes people a little more susceptible to truth coming in. So I said, that's one way it could have gotten there. And made by accident, by lightning and the wind and everything. It could have been made by accident. The problem with that theory is, if it was made by accident, you would have millions upon millions upon millions of other objects that look like watches, but didn't quite make the cut. But you don't. You only have this one watch in the middle of the woods. Another way it could have gotten there, someone dropped it. I was on a flight one time talking to an atheist. He said, it could have been made by accident. And I said, you're right, but you need to know right now before we go any further, you have more faith than I do. But your faith is blind. He said, whoa, nobody's ever told me that before. I said, yeah, my faith makes sense, yours is blind. See, I'm not a really big fan of faith, even though I love faith, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of truth. I put my faith in the truth. Then I can show it, I can prove it. You know what a watch proves? A watch proves that somewhere in the world there's a watchmaker. There's no way a tornado could go through a watch factory and make by accident a watch. It had to have been made by somebody. If there's order, it proves that there's a higher order to create the order. My wife was on a team at Furman University to bring in a guy named Dr. Donald Coffey. He's the chairman of research for the urological school, Brady Urological School at the Johns Hopkins University. He's the head research guy, one of the top DNA specialists in the world. We brought Dr. Coffey in. We paid him several $1,000s at Furman to come present a paper at Furman, and he was going to get paid an exorbitant amount of money for publishing his paper. On this paper, I'm sitting there in the front row of this place. I got my coat and tie on, and I got all these scientists from all over the Eastern Seaboard sitting behind me. I was a pre-med major in undergraduate school, biology, physics, and chemistry, so I love this stuff. I just love it. And he was describing DNA, 10,000 revolutions this direction, 40,000 revolutions, and he was describing, I was just sitting there going, oh, this is like candy to me. And I like me some candy. I don't know why I'm doing this, but you know what I'm saying. So he starts talking about DNA, and he says, gentlemen, the chances of us getting DNA, one DNA cell from a primordial soup, in a 30 by 30 foot slide of a lake on the board. And I thought, oh no. He said the chance of lightning striking this primordial soup and making one DNA cell is the same chance of you taking an infinite number of monkeys with an infinite number of typewriters locked in a room together, and one monkey by accident typing out perfectly all the volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. For the younger people, it's called Wikipedia. And the crowd, you can hear the scientists from all over the Eastern Seaboard going, they're like grumbling under their breath. And I'm sitting there holding on to my seat. In one fell swoop, he destroyed the concept of evolution. You didn't evolve because there's no way DNA could have evolved. I'm holding on to my seat. Then he shows a giant slide of an ape right next to a giant slide of a man. And there's a double helix strands of DNA under each of them. And I'm thinking, oh no, he's going to say that it's kind of a microevolutionary process, and he's going to go through that. And I thought, oh no. Then he shows all the similarities, about 95% similar between ape and man. Sorry if that offends you guys. But then he starts showing the differences. And there's thousands of differences. Thousands. And he circles one on his board. He's using a little laser pointer. I'm intrigued with that because squirrel, I have issues with attention. You know, look at the laser pointer, that's cool. So, sorry, just relax. So he's circling, and he shows us one difference, and he says, for this one difference in the ape to mutate to make the man DNA part, the chances of that happening would be taking an infinite number of monkeys with an infinite number of typewriters And one monkey by accident, typing out perfectly all the volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And you could hear the scientists from the Eastern Seaboard going, grumbling out loud. And I'm holding on to my seat to keep from going, hallelujah. I mean, he's destroying evolution. And so I thought, this guy's amazing. I love him. The next slide is a 30 by 30 foot Bible opened up in Genesis 1:1. And he's underlined it with his laser pointer. Gentlemen, in the beginning, God created. There's no way, he's underlined it with his laser, there's no way we could have, he said, all this order, there's no way we could have DNA without a DNA maker. You can't have order out of disorder unless there's a higher order to create the order. All the laws of thermodynamics prove it's true. You can't have order out of disorder unless there's a higher order to create the order. And I'm going crazy right now. People are walking out complaining, grumbling. This guy's getting thousands of dollars for publishing his paper. My wife is part of the team that brought him in, so she had him in the back room, in a green room, with some tea and crumpets. And I asked her if I could come back, and she said, sure, no problem. I have my coat and tie on, and I drink my tea with my pinky out, because I had air. Maturity. So I walked up to him and I said, Dr. Coffey. He said, yes, sir. I said, I appreciate you bringing up the metaphysical aspects of creationism. I had to use big words to make it sound like he thought I knew what I was talking about. He says, yes, I'm very interested in metaphysics. I said, well, can I ask you a question? I kind of got happy here. I'll never forget, like right now, I'm getting kind of chilled in my soul thinking about it. I said, can I ask you a question? Yes, sir. I said, are you a Christian? You know what he said? He said, no, I just believe science should be honest about this stuff. You know what that means? If he was a Christian, I couldn't use this illustration with a skeptic. But because he's a scientist and one of the top DNA specialists in the world, and all he has to do is lose by saying what he said, lose his job, lose his reputation. If he says what he said there, all the scientists are going to throw him out. He doesn't care. He thinks science should be honest. There's no way your DNA was an accident. No way that you mutated. It's impossible. You can't have order out of disorder unless there's a higher order to create the order.